The man jerks awake to deafening music pounding through the walls, his breath fogging the air as if the room itself exhales with him. He doesn't know where he is, only that something has already gone wrong. The music cuts mid-note, replaced by silence so sharp it hurts. Across the room, someone is already watching him breathe. The watcher smiles like this is a reunion, not confinement. He speaks first, calm, as if the man waking up is already late. The bearded man tries to stand, but the floor subtly resists, grounding him in place. He realizes escape was never part of the design. The watcher calls this a conversation, not an interrogation. He insists nothing here will hurt, unless the truth takes too long. A faint hum seeps in, too steady to be natural. The bearded man feels time stretching, thinning, like it's being handled. The watcher admits this place wasn't built for comfort. It was built to wait. The walls flicker for half a second, revealing something sterile beneath the wood and frost. The cabin is a disguise. The watcher asks a simple question about a night that hasn't happened here yet. The bearded man flinches anyway. Outside the single window, snow falls in a perfect loop. No accumulation. No wind. Just repetition. The bearded man demands to know how long he's been here. The watcher answers with a number that makes no sense. A memory intrudes, bright lights, a chair, something cold near his neck. He didn't arrive here awake. The cabin snaps back into place, but the memory doesn't leave. The watcher notices and smiles wider. The watcher finally admits the bearded man isn't physically here. Not anymore. The words land heavy, but before they can settle, the hum deepens. Something is accelerating. The watcher explains that waiting feels different when time is adjustable. He doesn't say who controls it. The bearded man suddenly feels exhaustion crash into him all at once, like years compressed into seconds. The watcher calls this mercy. He says silence would have been worse. A distant mechanical click echoes, and the bearded man realizes the conversation has officially begun. The watcher asks him to start at the moment he thought no one was watching. The door locks without ever being touched. The bearded man says it started with a message he was never meant to read. It arrived without a sender, already marked urgent. The watcher doesn't react, but the hum sharpens as if the system recognizes the lie. The message wasn't accidental. He admits he was hired to monitor behavior patterns in remote transit hubs. He insists it was just data analysis. The watcher corrects him softly. It wasn't analysis. It was prediction. The bearded man remembers flagging a commuter as statistically unstable. The system suggested intervention before an incident occurred. He overrode the suggestion. The numbers weren't certain enough. The next morning, the tunnel filled with smoke and screaming metal. The prediction had been accurate. The watcher lets the silence expand, then asks how many were lost. The bearded man refuses to answer. Instead, the bearded man talks about a second alert days later. This one targeted someone he recognized. The system predicted violence tied to a rural address. A frozen roadside forest. He knew the location. He had visited once, years earlier, under better circumstances. The watcher asks whether he intervened this time. The bearded man says yes too quickly. In truth, he waited. He wanted clearer confirmation before acting again. By the time he drove out, the snow had already sealed the narrow road behind him. Inside the house at the address, everything was quiet. Too quiet to be harmless. He found a man unconscious on the kitchen floor, blood spreading slowly beneath him. The system had predicted assault. The bearded man insists he didn't cause it. He only arrived after the damage was done. The watcher counters with timestamp logs that disagree. The arrival and the assault overlap perfectly. The bearded man's breathing accelerates as the room subtly contracts. The cabin walls inch closer. He claims he slipped on ice, that the blow was accidental. He says he panicked. The Watcher doesn't challenge the accident. He challenges what happened next. The bearded man says he called for help immediately. The hum spikes again. Logs show no outgoing calls. Instead, they show him pacing for 17 minutes. 17 minutes is enough time for a head wound to become fatal. He knows that. He whispers that he was afraid of being blamed. His career had already been fragile after the tunnel incident. So he left. He stepped back into the storm and drove away. The Watcher reveals there was another presence in the house that night. Not predicted. A second heat signature remained stationary for hours after he left. The bearded man shakes his head. He claims he searched every room. The system replays the house layout, revealing a locked interior door he never opened. Behind that door, someone waited through the night, unaware the only adult in the house was dying. The bearded man's voice fractures as he realizes what the prediction missed. It didn't account for isolation. Weather reports show the storm intensified overnight, sealing the road completely. No emergency services could reach the address for 36 hours. When responders finally arrived, they found 2 bodies. One inside. One outside in the snow. The bearded man insists he didn't know anyone else was there. He says the system should have warned him. The Watcher replies that the system only predicts violence, not neglect. The cabin glitches again, exposing white walls and cables beneath the illusion. The experiment is almost complete. The Watcher asks him to state clearly what he did after striking the man. No metaphors. No delays. The bearded man finally admits he chose himself over certainty. And he left. The hum becomes a roar, and the cabin walls peel away completely. The illusion drops, exposing a sterile chamber wrapped in cables and glass. The Watcher remains seated, untouched by the transformation. He says the confession threshold has been reached. The bearded man demands to know what threshold means. The room answers with a countdown projected above him. The Watcher explains that subjective time can now be adjusted without restriction. The experiment is moving to final calibration. The bearded man realizes he is not in a body. He is a construct designed to remember. Memory floods him, bright lights, a signature on a digital consent form, a final injection. The Watcher clarifies that the physical trial concluded weeks ago. This is sentencing. Outside the chamber, a tall officer waits with arms crossed, monitoring biometric readouts. The bearded man lunges at the Watcher, but his hands pass through him like static. Authority here is untouchable. The Watcher informs him that isolation was selected as the appropriate corrective measure. A new environment loads instantly. The chamber collapses into endless snow under a blank sky. There are no roads now. No houses. Just horizon and wind. The Watcher's voice echoes from nowhere, explaining the time multiplier. 1 minute outside equals centuries inside. The bearded man screams, but the sound dissolves into the wind before traveling a meter. In the observation corridor, the tall officer asks if this duration is necessary. The Watcher nods without hesitation. Back inside the construct, years pass in seconds. The bearded man carves marks into ice that never accumulates. He builds a shelter from packed snow, only for it to reset at the next cycle. Hunger never arrives, but exhaustion does. He cannot die, only endure. The sky glitches, briefly revealing white panels beyond the illusion. There is no escape hatch. Centuries accumulate like invisible weight. He begins talking to shapes in the distance that never answer. Outside, only seconds tick by. The tall officer checks the clock and shifts uneasily. The Watcher increases the multiplier again. He calls it procedural discretion. Inside the snowfield, the wind intensifies into a constant storm. There is no quiet left. He forgets the exact number of years. He stops counting entirely. The watcher records neural stability metrics as they begin to fracture. The bearded man drops to the ground and laughs without sound, mouth open to the sky. Fragments of the night in the house replay endlessly: floor tiles, a fallen body, a closed door. He finally admits aloud that he chose silence over help. No one is there to hear it. The storm pauses briefly, granting him a horizon for the first time in ages. It stretches infinitely. In the corridor, the tall officer asks when it ends. The watcher replies, "It already has." The bearded man's movements slow as if gravity has thickened. Even thoughts feel delayed. Neural readings plateau. The watcher marks the construct as permanently compliant. The snow resets again, erasing every mark he ever made. There is nothing left of effort. He no longer tries to move. The storm continues without needing him. The watcher powers down secondary systems. Only the time loop remains active. The tall officer signs the final authorization. The file is sealed. Inside the construct, the bearded man stares forward, eyes unfocused. Recognition fades. The storm becomes the only constant companion he will ever have. Outside, the watcher removes his glasses and exhales. The procedure is complete. In the frozen construct, centuries continue to fall like snow. They never reach the ground. The server vault doors seal with a hydraulic thud. The construct is now classified as indefinite containment. The tall officer escorts the watcher down the detention corridor without speaking. Their footsteps echo in perfect rhythm. The watcher reminds the officer that the confession secured multiple pending cases. He frames it as public safety. The officer responds that discretion has limits. Time manipulation at that scale leaves records. Inside the construct, the bearded man kneels in snow that never melts. He no longer searches for shelter. His memories compress into fragments: white light, a kitchen floor, a closed door. The sequence repeats without context. Back in the corridor, the officer stops walking. He informs the watcher that his oversight role is terminated. The watcher's composure tightens but does not break. He asks who will manage the remaining constructs. The officer replies that automated systems will handle them. Human discretion introduced unnecessary escalation. A silent alert appears on the officer's tablet: time multiplier set beyond authorized parameters. It was increased twice. The officer realizes the watcher acted outside mandate. The punishment exceeded judicial recommendation. Security locks engage along the corridor. This time, the watcher hears doors sealing behind him. The officer informs him that procedural abuse carries its own corrective protocol. The watcher protests that he optimized for deterrence. His voice echoes against metal walls. Inside the construct, the bearded man finally stops reacting to the storm. He stands as still as the horizon. Neural metrics stabilize at minimal activity. The system labels him permanently isolated. The officer authorizes a mirrored sentence for the watcher, scaled to policy limits. Not indefinite, but severe. The watcher is seated beneath white lights as technicians prepare the interface. He recognizes the room instantly. In the frozen construct, snow continues to fall around a figure who no longer moves. Outside, another countdown begins. 2 constructs now run in parallel, one indefinite, one measured. The system records balance restored.